The Hindu Kush mountains rose like broken teeth against an August sky that had forgotten mercy. At 8,500 feet, the air was thin enough to make every breath deliberate, every movement calculated. The kind of altitude where mistakes didn't just cost missions, they cost lives. August 2011, Helmand Province, Afghanistan. Maya Hartley lay motionless behind a ridge of shale and scrub pine, her body pressed into the mountain like she'd been born there. 23 years old, 5'3", 118 pounds, small enough that the Taliban fighters 3,000 feet below had stopped looking for threats at her elevation. Small enough that the Marine Force recon team pinned in the valley had asked for air support instead of a sniper. Small enough to be underestimated, which was exactly how she preferred it. Her rifle was a M110 semi-automatic sniper system. Standard issue, nothing custom, nothing special except the 10,000 hours she'd put behind it since her father first placed it in her hands at 15. The same rifle he'd carry through Desert Storm. The same rifle that had been in his hands when he died in Mogadishu, 1993, when she was 18 years old. The scope showed her everything she needed to know. 12 Marines trapped in a dry riverbed, 200 Taliban fighters moving to surround them, 72 hours into the operation. No sleep, no extraction possible until nightfall, still 6 hours away, and one target that mattered more than all the others. 2,400 yards downrange, 1.36 miles. A Taliban commander directing the encirclement from behind a Toyota Technical, gesturing with a radio in one hand and an AK-47 in the other. Kill him, and the attack would falter. Miss him, and 12 Marines would die before sunset. Maya's spotter, a Marine gunnery sergeant named Torres, lay beside her with a spotting scope. His voice came through her earpiece, low and steady. Winds variable, 8 to 12 miles per hour, switching between 9 and 10 o'clock. Copy. Target is mobile, keeps moving behind the vehicle. I see him. Ghost, that's... Torres paused, recalculating. That's 2,400 yards. We've never confirmed a kill past 1,800. First time for everything, Gunny. Torres said nothing for a moment. Then, your call, Ghost, but if you miss, they'll know we're up here. We'll have to displace, and those Marines down there won't make it. Maya's heart rate was 68 beats per minute, slower than most people achieved in sleep. Years of training, years of discipline, years of her father's voice in her head. Control your breathing, baby girl. Control your heart. Control the shot. She began the calculations. 2,400 yards, 7,200 feet, 1.36 miles. The bullet, a 190-grain Sierra Match King, 7.62 millimeter NATO, would leave the barrel at 2,600 feet per second. In the thin air at this altitude, it would maintain velocity better than at sea level, but the distance was still extreme. Time of flight, 3.4 seconds, an eternity in combat. The target could move, the wind could shift. The earth itself would rotate beneath the bullet's path. Bullet drop at this range, 640 inches, 53.3 feet, higher than a 5-story building. She would aim at empty sky above the target and trust physics to bring the round down. Wind drift. With a 10-mile-per-hour crosswind at 9 o'clock, the bullet would drift approximately 22 inches to the right, but the wind was gusting, variable. She watched the heat shimmer, watched the way dust moved in the valley, building a three-dimensional map of air currents in her mind. Coriolis effect. Shooting north in the northern hemisphere, the Earth's rotation would push the bullet 2.2 minutes of angle to the right. Small, but at this distance, small errors became catastrophic ones. Spin drift. The rifling in her barrel twisted right, imparting spin that would drift the bullet another 1.8 minutes of angle right. Temperature, 107 degrees Fahrenheit. The hot, thin air would allow the bullet to travel slightly faster, requiring a correction of negative 0.5 minutes of angle. She adjusted her scope. 34.7 minutes of angle elevation. 146 clicks on the turret. She counted each one, muscle memory and mathematics combining into something that felt like instinct, but was actually 10,000 hours of practice compressed into 3 seconds of thought. 11.8 minutes of angle left on the windage to compensate for the cumulative right drift. All of this happened in the time it took to take 2 breaths. The target stepped clear of the Toyota, radio to his ear, gesturing to fighters moving up the canyon walls toward the trapped Marines. Maya's breathing slowed. Exhale. Pause. The natural respiratory pause where the body is perfectly still between breaths. Her finger took up slack on the trigger. 3.2 pounds of pressure, increasing steadily, smoothly, so gradually that the shot would surprise even her. The M110 cracked. The sound echoed off the mountains, a sharp, clean note that seemed to hang in the air. 3.4 seconds of silence. Then, through the scope, Maya watched the Taliban commander's head snap back. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The radio tumbled from his hand. Torres's voice came through, almost reverent. "Tango down. Solid shot, Ghost. Solid goddamn shot." Below, the Taliban attack faltered. Confusion rippled through their ranks. Without the commander's coordination, the encirclement collapsed into scattered skirmishes. By nightfall, the Marines extracted safely. 37 shots that day, 37 hits. The mission report would call it exceptional marksmanship. The Marines she'd saved would call it a miracle. Maya called it Tuesday. 15 years later, February 2026. The morning fog off the Pacific rolled through the main gate of Naval Support Base Coronado like a living thing, gray and cold and indifferent. The guard booth sat beneath halogen lights that did nothing to warm the pre-dawn chill. A silver Honda Accord pulled to a stop at the checkpoint. Nothing military about it. Nothing that suggested the woman behind the wheel had once been the most feared sniper in Marine Corps history. Maya Hartley stepped out. Jeans, a faded gray hoodie with UCSD printed across the chest, a size too large, bought at a thrift store specifically because it made her look smaller, younger, less significant. Boots scuffed from actual wear, not the fashionable kind. A single duffel bag slung over her shoulder, heavy in a way that suggested more than clothes. The guard, a young sailor who couldn't have been more than 20, barely glanced up from his clipboard. "ID, ma'am." She handed over the laminated card. He scanned it, eyes skipping over the name without recognition. Monroe, Lydia A., Administrative Specialist, transfer from Norfolk, GS7 pay grade. Nothing remarkable, nothing worth a second look. "Welcome to Coronado, Ms. Monroe. Proceed to Building 7 for in-processing." Behind him, 2 Marines leaned against the concrete barrier, coffee cups steaming in the cold air. One of them watched the Honda pull through, then turned to his companion with a smirk. "Another admin transfer, 3rd one this month. Hope she can type faster than the last one. That woman couldn't find her own ass with both hands in a map." Laughter drifted through the fog. Maya heard it through her open window. Didn't react. Didn't look back. Just kept driving, eyes scanning the base with the systematic attention of someone conducting a threat assessment. Which, in a way, she was. The base had the worn look of a place that had seen better decades. Buildings that needed paint. Parking lots with more cracks than asphalt. Equipment that was maintained just enough to pass inspection, but not enough to actually function at peak capacity. Maya had seen bases like this before, places where budget cuts and bureaucratic neglect had ground down morale until mediocrity became the standard, where good people did their best with broken tools and called it excellence because they'd forgotten what excellence actually looked like. Her orders said she was here to assist with logistics, streamline supply chains, improve requisition processing times. Her real orders, the ones that had been hand-delivered by a 2-star admiral in a soundproof room at the Pentagon 3 weeks ago, said something different entirely. Coronado has a 40% accident rate, 6 months, 15 separate incidents involving weapons malfunctions, equipment failures, and near-miss catastrophes. NCIS investigated for 5 months and found nothing conclusive. Either we have the unluckiest base in the Pacific Fleet, or someone is sabotaging us from the inside. Admiral Thomas Williams had been a linebacker in his youth, and retirement hadn't softened him much. He looked at Maya across the conference table with eyes that had seen too many funerals. We need someone who understands both fleet operations and ground-level sabotage. Someone who can walk into that base and see what everyone else is missing. You have NCIS for that, sir? NCIS found nothing because whoever's doing this knows how NCIS operates. They need someone unexpected, someone nobody will suspect. Maya had studied the file, 15 incidents. Pattern analysis suggested deliberate targeting of weapons systems. Small things, a fouled rifle bore here, a miscalibrated sight there. Individually, they look like maintenance oversights. Collectively, they formed a picture of systematic sabotage. The primary suspect, Colonel Victor Brennan, 58 years old, Marine Corps sniper instructor for the past 12 years, decorated veteran of Gulf War, Afghanistan, 2 Bronze Stars, a Silver Star, the kind of record that made you untouchable. Also, diagnosed with PTSD in 2010, but had successfully hidden the severity from the Corps Medical Board. Treatment records suggested increasing dissociation and paranoid ideation. Classic profile for someone whose trauma had evolved into something darker. You want me to go undercover? Admiral Williams had nodded slowly. We need proof before we can act. Brennan is a hero to a lot of people. If we move against him without evidence, it'll tear the base apart. But if we're right, and he's spiraling, he hadn't needed to finish. Maya knew what happened when warriors broke. Sometimes they broke quietly, turning inward. Sometimes they broke loudly, taking others with them. Why me specifically, sir? Williams had almost smiled. Because you're the only flag officer in the Navy who can pass as a GS-7 clerk. Because your scout sniper background means you'll spot things others miss. And because, he'd paused, choosing words carefully, because your father was Daniel Hartley, and Brennan served with him in Desert Storm. If anyone can reach him, if this can be resolved without destroying him, it's you. So here she was, Admiral Stars traded for a clerk's badge, Command Authority traded for a duffel bag and a used Honda, walking into the beast's mouth with nothing but patience and the lessons her father had beaten into her bones. Building 7 was a 3-story concrete structure that looked like it had been designed by someone who believed architecture should punish the eye. Gray walls, gray floors, the kind of fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Maya pushed through the double doors and immediately cataloged the space. Reception desk to the left, manned by a petty officer whose name tag read Harris. He had the exhausted look of someone working double shifts because the base was chronically understaffed. Coffee cup within arm's reach. Wedding ring with a slight tan line suggesting he'd recently gained weight. Stress eating, probably. Phone console with 3 lines blinking on hold. A television mounted in the corner played a safety training video that nobody was watching. Posters on the walls about readiness, resilience, mental health resources. All of them faded, edges curling. The poster about the family fun run was dated 6 months ago. Harris glanced up when she approached, but his eyes didn't really focus. Autopilot engagement. Help you, ma'am? Lydia Monroe, transfer from Norfolk, administrative support. Right. He pulled up something on his computer, squinting at the screen. Monroe. Yeah, got you. Reporting to Lieutenant Colonel Kane's office first, then you'll move down to Major Holloway in logistics. 3rd floor, end of the hall, door on the right. He printed out a temporary badge, slid it across the counter with a base map that had coffee stains obscuring half the building numbers. Welcome to Coronado. Try not to get lost. The elevator creaked its way upward with the reluctant groan of machinery that needed maintenance. Maya watched her reflection in the brushed steel doors, saw the version of herself she'd constructed for this assignment. Small, unassuming, the kind of person who faded into backgrounds and corners, who people talked over and around but never directly to. Not the woman who'd made a 2,400-yard shot with 12 Marines' lives hanging in the balance. Not the Rear Admiral who'd commanded a destroyer squadron through the Taiwan Strait crisis in 2023. Just Lydia, just a clerk, just another warm body to throw at the logistics department's eternal backlog. The elevator doors opened on the third floor. Long hallway, bulletin boards crowded with notices that nobody read. The smell of burned coffee and industrial cleaning solution. She found Lieutenant Colonel Kane's office at the end of the hall. Knocked twice. Enter. David Kane sat behind a desk that was losing a war against paperwork. Stacks of folders leaned at angles that defied gravity. Coffee mug, his third of the morning, judging by the rings on the desk, sat among forms that needed signatures, reports that needed reviews, problems that needed solutions he didn't have time to implement. He was 52. Wedding ring, photos of 2 kids on the desk, college age. Ribbons on his uniform included a combat action ribbon and a Navy Commendation Medal with V device, which meant he'd seen real action and done well in it. But the skin under his eyes had the papery quality of chronic stress, and his shoulders carried the weight of a man who'd been told to do more with less for so long that he'd stopped expecting anything different. He didn't look up immediately when she entered. Finished signing whatever form he was working on, stamped it, added it to a stack. Then, finally, his eyes found her. "You the transfer?" "Yes, sir, Lydia Monroe, administrative support." He skimmed the single page of her carefully sanitized personnel file. The real version was 20 pages long and classified at a level that required presidential authorization to access. This version said she'd bounced around various admin positions for 12 years, never staying anywhere long, never making waves, never achieving anything noteworthy. Perfect invisibility. Monroe, he said it aloud, like he was filing it away in mental storage he'd probably never access again. "All right, welcome to Coronado. You'll be working in logistics. God knows they need the help. Major Holloway will be your direct supervisor. She's sharp, but running on fumes. Whole department is." "Understood, sir." "You familiar with the new defense logistics system?" "Some experience, sir." If he dug deeper, he would have learned that Maya had helped design the current iteration of DLS during a rotation at the Pentagon in 2019. But Kane didn't dig deeper. Why would he? She was just another clerk. "Good. It's a mess. We're months behind on critical requisitions. Motor pool is angry, communications is half crippled, and higher headquarters is on my neck about readiness metrics." He looked at her directly for the first time, really looked. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or the instinct that told career officers when something didn't quite fit. But it passed. "Logistics is down the hall. Room 23. Report to Major Holloway. She'll get you set up. Try not to quit in the first month. Holloway doesn't need another person who folds when the work piles up." "I don't quit easily, sir." Kane almost smiled at that. Almost. Then the phone on his desk rang, and he was already reaching for it, already moving to the next crisis, as Maya let herself out. Room 23's door stood open. Voices spilled into the hallway, the particular tone of people who'd been arguing the same points for so long they'd forgotten they were arguing. "I'm telling you, if we don't get those generator parts this week, Morrison is going to burn this building down. He can get in line. Communications has been calling every hour. Sullivan keeps saying the relay equipment is coming. I'll believe it when the crates actually show up." Weary laughter, the kind that had forgotten what humor actually sounded like. Maya stepped through the door into controlled chaos. The logistics office was exactly what she'd expected. Rows of desks, each one occupied by someone staring at a computer screen with the expression of a person trying to solve a puzzle that kept changing its own rules. Phones ringing, printers jamming, stacks of paperwork breeding in corners like some kind of bureaucratic fungus. At the center of it all stood Major Rebecca Holloway, 36 years old, hair pulled into a bun that had started the day neat but had gradually surrendered to gravity and stress. Uniform pressed, but showing the wear patterns of someone who'd been working 70-hour weeks. Dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. But her posture was straight, her movements efficient, and when she looked at her people, there was something in her eyes that Maya recognized. Care. Actual, genuine care for the sailors and Marines working themselves into exhaustion under her command. Holloway noticed Maya in the doorway and crossed the room with the purposeful stride of someone who'd learned to make every step count. "You must be Monroe, the transfer from Norfolk." "Yes, ma'am." "Rebecca Holloway, welcome to what some people generously call organized chaos. I call it controlled panic." She glanced at the orders Maya handed over, scanned them quickly. "All right, we're glad to have you. We lost 2 people to burnout last month and 1 to a promotion, so consider yourself thrown into the deep end." From a desk near the window, a voice called out, "Hope she can type faster than the last one, ma'am, or at least not cry in the bathroom on day 3. Sergeant Michael Briggs, 28, combat action ribbon, so he'd seen real action, but stationed at a logistics desk instead of a line unit, which meant either an injury or disciplinary action had landed him here. The slight edge in his voice suggested he resented it. A couple of other clerks chuckled. Not cruel laughter, exactly, just the exhausted humor of people who'd seen too many new arrivals arrive with hope and leave with resignation. Holloway shot Briggs a look that could have stripped paint. "Sergeant Briggs, you want to run the incoming priority queue today?" "No, ma'am." He turned back to his screen quickly. Maya didn't flinch. Her expression stayed neutral, calm. She'd heard far worse in combat zones. The difference was that in combat, people understood what was at stake. Here, people were bleeding frustration into jokes because nobody had shown them there was another way to bleed. "You can start here." Holloway gestured to an empty desk near the back. Generic computer, the same model the Navy had been buying since 2015. Stack of forms in the inbox that looked like they'd been sitting there since the previous occupant had fled. "Log in with this guest account until IT processes your credentials. We'll put you on inbound requisitions and tracking misrouted shipments. If you see something that makes no sense, flag it. Don't assume it's your mistake. Odds are the mistake started 3 months ago and nobody caught it." "Yes, ma'am." Maya set her duffel down beside the chair, carefully because inside was a disassembled M110 that her father had carried through Desert Storm and she'd carried through Afghanistan. And even broken down, it weighed enough to raise questions if anyone decided to be curious. She slid into the seat and let her fingers rest on the keyboard. The screen blinked awake. Login screen. She entered the guest credentials and waited while the system loaded with the enthusiasm of a sloth on sedatives. Behind her, the office continued its daily grind. Holloway moving from desk to desk, troubleshooting, encouraging, putting out fires. Briggs muttering under his breath when a form bounced back for the 3rd time. A civilian clerk near the front, rubbing her temples every time she opened an email from the supply warehouse. Through the windows, Maya could see the tops of cranes over the harbor, ships at berth. Vehicles parked in a lot near the pier, several with hoods open to the sky, others missing tires. Delayed repairs, deferred maintenance, all symptoms of the same disease. The base hadn't collapsed into chaos, it had slipped into something worse, complacency. Requisitions delayed until late became normal. Equipment sidelined until nobody remembered it working. Communications patched together just enough to pass inspections. Morale so low that people stopped expecting better. And leadership so numb they'd stopped noticing that expectations had died. Maya had seen this before. In Afghanistan, in the months before the withdrawal, In other bases where budget cuts and bureaucratic exhaustion had ground down the machinery of war until it barely functioned. She knew how this story ended if nobody intervened. It ended with people dying because a part didn't arrive, or a system failed, or someone who'd been asking for help for 6 months finally stopped asking. Her computer finished loading, the screen filled with a database of pending requisitions. Each line represented something someone needed to do their job. Each delay represented a unit operating at less than full capacity. Each error represented hours of someone's life wasted untangling red tape instead of accomplishing the mission. She began to work, not making speeches, not revealing her rank, not trying to impress anyone with knowledge or authority she wasn't supposed to have. Just watching, listening the rhythms of this place, learning where the cracks were so she'd know where to start fixing them when the time came. 3 days into the assignment, Maya had mapped the office's invisible geography. She knew that Petty Officer Tom Rodriguez, 25 years old, stayed late every night trying to catch up on a data backlog that had been growing since before he'd arrived. That he'd been trained on the old system, but was now expected to master the new one without additional training time. That he was drowning and too proud or too scared to admit it. She knew that the civilian clerk, Jennifer Martinez, had a daughter with type 1 diabetes and was juggling medical appointments with a job that demanded 60-hour weeks. That she kept photos of the girl on her desk and looked at them every time the stress became overwhelming, like they were a talisman against despair. She knew that Sergeant Briggs's bitter humor came from a shoulder injury in Fallujah that had ended his infantry career and landed him behind a desk where he felt useless. That he'd applied for medical retirement twice and been denied both times. That he showed up every day and did the work, but hated every minute because it reminded him of what he'd lost. And she knew that Major Holloway was holding the entire operation together through sheer force of will, working 18-hour days, skipping meals, surviving on coffee and determination, because if she stopped, even for a moment, the whole thing would collapse. Maya knew all of this because she was invisible, because people talked around her like she wasn't there, because in her oversized hoodie and scuffed boots, with her quiet voice and downcast eyes, she'd become furniture, which was exactly where she needed to be. On the 4th day, she volunteered to stay late and help Rodriguez with the data entry backlog. He'd looked at her with surprise and something close to suspicion. People didn't volunteer for extra work in this office. They ran from it. But desperation won out. They worked until midnight. Maya showed him the patterns she'd spotted in his errors. The new system's interface didn't match the training manual screenshots, which meant half the instructions were sending him to the wrong menus. Not his fault. The system had been updated 3 months ago, but nobody had updated the training materials. She created a quick reference guide, printed it out, left it on his desk with a note. "You're not slow. The system lied to you. This should help." The next morning, Rodriguez looked at her differently. Not quite grateful, he was too tired for that, but with a flicker of something that might, eventually, become trust. These were the small victories that mattered. Not dramatic rescues or brilliant strategies, just one person helping another person not drown. Her father had taught her that. Back when she was 15 and learning to shoot, frustrated because she couldn't hit targets past 400 yards yet. "Baby girl," he'd said, "sniping isn't about the long shots. It's about all the short shots you make first. You build skill in increments. Patient, steady, 10,000 hours of small improvements until the impossible becomes routine." The same is true of leadership. You don't change an organization with speeches and orders. You change it with 1,000 small actions, with showing up, with doing the work, with treating people like they matter. Excellence isn't loud. It's quiet. It just exists. And eventually, people notice. So Maya existed quietly, fixed small problems, stayed late, never complained, never drew attention. And slowly the office's rhythms began to shift around her. On day 7, Major Holloway called her into the conference room. It was late afternoon. Most of the day shift had gone home, leaving only the people who couldn't leave because the work never stopped. Holloway looked exhausted, more exhausted than usual, which was saying something. "Monroe, sit." Maya sat. Holloway studied her for a long moment. Then, "You're not like the other transfers we've had." "Ma'am?" "The others, they come in optimistic, then the work breaks them, and they either quit or turn bitter like Briggs. But you," she paused, choosing words, "you haven't complained once. You stay late. You help people without being asked. And you see things." Maya kept her expression neutral. "I don't understand, ma'am." "Rodriguez's data entry problem. You fixed it in one night." "I've had IT looking at that for 2 months. I just matched the interface to the manual, ma'am. Not complicated. Except IT couldn't figure it out, and you did." Holloway leaned back in her chair. "Where did you work before Norfolk?" Maya rattled off the cover story, bouncing between admin positions. Nothing remarkable, nothing that would explain competence. Holloway listened, but her eyes said she didn't quite believe it. "All right," she finally said. "Keep doing what you're doing. God knows we need people who give a damn." She started to dismiss Maya, then paused. "One more thing. There's a coordination meeting tomorrow, 0900. I want you there to take notes. Operations, maintenance, all the department heads. You'll sit in the back and document everything. Can you handle that?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Dismissed." Maya stood, turned to leave. At the door, Holloway's voice stopped her. "Monroe, thank you. For helping Rodriguez. For caring." Maya turned back, saw the exhaustion in Holloway's face, the weight she carried. "It's what we're supposed to do, ma'am," Maya said quietly. "Take care of each other." She left before Holloway could respond, but she felt the Major's eyes on her back all the way down the hall. The coordination meeting would be important. All the department heads in one room, including almost certainly Colonel Victor Brennan, the man she'd come here to investigate. The man who might be sabotaging weapon systems because his PTSD had finally broken him. The man who'd served with her father in Desert Storm, before Mogadishu, before everything changed. Maya returned to her desk and opened the file she'd been building. Incident reports, maintenance logs, pattern analysis. 15 weapons malfunctions in 6 months, fouled bores, miscalibrated sights, gas tubes obstructed. All small things, all potentially fatal. And all of them, when she traced the paperwork back, had been inspected or handled by Colonel Brennan in the 72 hours before they failed. Tomorrow, she'd see him in person for the first time. Tomorrow, she'd begin to understand whether she was hunting a saboteur or watching a hero destroy himself. Either way, the clock was ticking, because the incident reports showed an acceleration. 2 malfunctions in the first month, 4 in the second, 9 in the last 30 days. Whatever was happening, it was getting worse. And Maya knew from experience that when warriors broke, they rarely broke slowly. They held together through discipline and denial until one day they didn't, and then everything came apart at once. She just had to make sure that when Brennan finally broke, he didn't take innocent people with him. Outside, the sun was setting over the Pacific. The base settled into its evening rhythms. Guards changed shifts. Buildings locked down. The ordinary machinery of military life continued its endless cycle. And somewhere on this base, a man who'd once been a hero was fighting a war against his own mind. Maya closed her laptop and picked up her duffel. Inside, wrapped in a t-shirt, was the photograph she carried everywhere. Her father in Desert Storm, younger than she was now, holding the M110 that would eventually come to her. Smiling the way he used to smile before Mogadishu taught him that some things couldn't be fixed with bullets. "Stay patient, baby girl," he'd told her once. "The best shots are the ones you don't take because you waited for certainty. Rush the shot and you miss. Miss and people die. But when the moment comes, when you're absolutely certain, then you take the shot. No hesitation, no doubt, just clean execution. She wasn't ready to take the shot yet, but she was getting close to certainty. And when the moment came, she'd be ready. The coordination meeting started at 0900 sharp, in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and resignation. Maya arrived 10 minutes early, claimed a seat in the back corner where she could observe without being observed, and opened her notebook to a fresh page. The room filled slowly, officers carrying folders in frustration in equal measure. Captain Owen Bradford from operations, moving with the stiff gait of someone nursing an old back injury. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen from communications. No, wait, Sullivan. Ethan Sullivan. Maya corrected herself mentally, annoyed at the slip. Master Chief Marcus Blackwell from the motor pool, coffee cup in one massive hand, grease still visible under his fingernails despite obvious scrubbing. And then, last through the door, Colonel Victor Brennan. Maya felt her breathing steady automatically, the way it always did when a target entered her scope. Not because she was preparing to shoot, but because observation required the same discipline as marksmanship. Control, stillness, complete focus. Brennan was 58, but looked older. The kind of weathering that came from carrying weight that wasn't visible on any scale. 6'2", probably 200 pounds, most of it still muscle, despite the gray in his hair. Ribbons on his chest told stories. Bronze star with V device, silver star, purple heart, combat action ribbon. The geometry of a warrior's life written in colored cloth. But it was his hands that told Maya what she needed to know. They trembled, just slightly. The kind of tremor you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. The kind that came from either too much caffeine or too much adrenaline, or the particular neurological damage that PTSD carved into the nervous system over years of untreated trauma. He caught her watching. For just a moment, their eyes met across the room. Something flickered in his gaze. Recognition, maybe, though not of her specifically. More like he recognized the quality of her attention, the way one predator might notice another. Then he looked away, took his seat at the table, and the meeting began. Lieutenant Colonel Kane ran the meeting with the weary efficiency of a man who'd run 1,000 identical meetings and expected nothing to change. Supply chain updates, maintenance backlogs, readiness metrics that painted a picture of a base slowly drowning in its own dysfunction. 20 minutes in, the conversation turned to the new deployment readiness protocols. Captain Bradford dropped his folder on the table with more force than necessary. "Here we go again," he muttered. "Another brilliant idea from someone who's never had to actually deploy a unit." Around the table, several officers nodded. The particular camaraderie of people united by shared frustration with distant bureaucrats who made rules they'd never have to follow. "These new codes," Bradford continued, tapping the directive. "Whoever wrote this has never tried to coordinate aircrew sleep cycles with maintenance windows and inspection requirements. It's theory land, completely disconnected from reality." Maya sat perfectly still, pen poised over her notebook. She'd written the first draft of those protocols in 2023, in a Pentagon conference room, trying to build something that would push readiness without breaking people. What had emerged after committees and revisions and political compromise was heavier than she'd wanted, more complex than ideal. But it was better than what came before. If anyone had actually read the implementation guide, instead of just complaining about the summary, they'd understand why certain requirements existed. She wrote down Bradford's exact words. Not to defend herself later, to understand where the theory she'd built met the reality she was now observing. "It was easier," someone said, "when we just did things the old way." "The old way didn't track anything," Kane pointed out. "That's why we had 3 near-miss incidents last year that nobody could explain because we had no data." "And now we have data," Bradford shot back, "but no time to actually use it because we're drowning in paperwork." The argument spiraled into familiar territory. Maya had heard variations of this conversation in every command she'd ever served. The eternal tension between accountability and efficiency, between safety and speed. Brennan hadn't said anything, just sat there, hands flat on the table to hide their trembling, eyes distant. Maya watched him while pretending to watch the entire room. When the meeting finally ground to its inconclusive end, problems identified, no solutions implemented, everyone leaving more frustrated than they'd arrived, she stayed in her corner, head down, organizing her notes. Most of the officers filed out without acknowledging her presence. Furniture didn't require acknowledgement. But Brennan paused in the doorway, turned back, looked directly at her. "You're the new admin transfer," he said. Statement, not question. "Yes, sir, Lydia Monroe." He studied her for a long moment. "You former military?" The question caught her off guard. She'd been careful, moved like a civilian, talked like a civilian, showed no sign of the 20 years she'd spent in uniform. "No, sir, just GS civilian track." He didn't sound convinced. "You sit different, back straight, hands always visible. That's military posture." Maya forced herself to slouch slightly, made her smile apologetic. "Yoga, sir. I have a bad back. Teacher drilled good posture into me." It was a plausible lie. Brennan seemed to accept it, or at least stop caring. He nodded once and left, but Maya's pulse had quickened. If Brennan was observant enough to spot her posture, he was more alert than his trembling hands suggested. The PTSD might be degrading his fine motor control, but his tactical awareness remained sharp, which made him more dangerous and harder to predict. She gathered her notes and headed back to logistics, mind already working through implications. She'd need to be more careful, more civilian, less invisible warrior, more invisible clerk. The afternoon dissolved into the usual chaos of requisitions and routing slips and phone calls to supply depots that never seemed to have what was needed when it was needed. Maya worked steadily through her queue, listening to the office's rhythms, learning its patterns. At 1600, Holloway dropped a stack of forms on her desk. "Monroe, I need these signed by the motor pool chief. Can you run them down there?" "Yes, ma'am." The forms were priority requisitions for vehicle parts that should have arrived 2 months ago. Maya scanned them quickly, noted the serial numbers, cross-referenced them mentally against the incident reports she'd memorized. 3 of these parts were for vehicles that had been deadlined after inspections conducted by... She checked the maintenance logs on her phone. Inspections conducted by personnel under Colonel Brennan's training program. Coincidence, maybe, or maybe not. The motor pool occupied a sprawling complex of bays and parking lots on the eastern edge of the base. The smell hit Maya 50 yards out. Oil, rubber, exhaust, the particular metallic scent of machinery being taken apart and put back together. She found Master Chief Marcus Blackwell in Bay 3, standing over a Humvee with its hood open like a mouth, screaming at the sky. He was built like a man who'd spent 30 years lifting heavy things and hadn't slowed down much in his late 40s. Dark skin sheened with sweat despite the cool February air. Hands that looked like they could break concrete, but moved with surprising precision as he gestured to a young Marine struggling with a stubborn bolt. "You're using the wrong approach angle," Blackwell said, voice carrying across the bay with the particular authority of a senior NCO who'd taught this lesson 10,000 times. "The bolt's not stuck because it's tight. It's stuck because you're fighting the thread. Come at it from 15 degrees left." The Marine adjusted. The bolt gave. "There you go. Physics, not force." Maya waited until the teaching moment finished before approaching. Blackwell noticed her, eyes flicking from her face to the clipboard in her hands, to her civilian clothes, and back to her face. Assessment completed in 2 seconds. "Help you, ma'am?" "Master Chief Blackwell, I'm Lydia Monroe, from Logistics. Major Holloway sent me with priority requisitions for signature." He took the forms, scanned them with the speed of someone who'd been reading maintenance paperwork since before Maya was born. His expression darkened. "Let me guess," he said. These are the parts that have been in transit for 8 weeks. According to the tracking, yes, Master Chief. Right. He looked at her, really looked this time. You're new to the base, so let me explain something. I'm not signing these.
Sir?
You clerks, no offense, you have no idea what it means when vehicles sit deadlined. You want me to certify that we're good with parts we don't have, so somebody up the chain can check a box and call it done? He held out the clipboard. Take it back. Come back when the parts are actually on the loading dock. It was the response Maya had expected. She'd read Blackwell's personnel file. 28 years in the Corps, 2 deployments in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. The kind of NCO who'd rather die than lie on paperwork because he'd seen what happened when people cut corners on maintenance. But she'd also read the incident reports. 3 vehicles from his motor pool had failed in the field in the last 4 months. 1 had resulted in injuries, and all 3 had passed inspection before deployment. Master Chief, she said quietly, I'm not asking you to certify anything untrue. What I need to understand is what you need on paper so we can stop pretending parts are somewhere they're not. Blackwell's eyes narrowed. Come again? The tracking says in transit, but these parts have been in transit for 56 days. Either they're lost, or someone's lying about shipping them, or they were never ordered in the first place. What I need from you is accurate status so I can push it up the chain as a crisis instead of a routine delay. For a moment, Blackwell just stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression. Not quite respect, she hadn't earned that yet, but interest. You really new to logistics? He asked. Relatively, sir. Because you talk like someone who understands the difference between what the system says and what's actually true. He studied her again. All right, here's what I need. Accurate status on back orders, not in transit, not expected delivery, actual status, lost, delayed, or never shipped. Second, I need someone to stop letting supply mark things as shipped when they're not. And third, I need leadership to understand that a deadline vehicle isn't just a number on a report. It's a mission that won't launch and Marines who might die because they can't move. Maya nodded slowly, wrote it all down. Understood, Master Chief. I'll make sure this goes up the chain properly. You do that. He signed the forms but added detailed notes in the margins. And Monroe, I don't know what your story is, but you're the first clerk who's asked the right questions in a long time. Keep doing that. She walked back toward headquarters thinking about Blackwell's words, about vehicles that had passed inspection and then failed in the field, about the gap between what systems said and what was actually true, about patterns that were starting to emerge. Back in logistics, she pulled up the maintenance database on her computer, cross-referenced vehicle inspection records with failure reports, built a timeline. The pattern was there if you knew how to look. Vehicles inspected or serviced by personnel from Brennan's training program showed a 15% higher failure rate than vehicles serviced by other teams. Not enormous, not enough to trigger automated alerts, but statistically significant if you were looking. And all of the failures involved systems that required precision: fuel injectors, electrical connections, calibrated sensors. The kind of work where a trembling hand might make small errors that wouldn't show up immediately, but would compound over time. Maya sat back thinking. Brennan wasn't sabotaging vehicles directly. He was training Marines while his PTSD degraded his fine motor control. And those Marines were learning from someone whose hands no longer had the precision the work required. Small errors multiplied across dozens of vehicles, creating a cascade of failures, which meant he probably didn't even know he was doing it, which made the whole thing sadder and more dangerous. She was still thinking about it at 1900, long after the office had emptied, when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was simple. Tomorrow, 0600, rifle range. If you really shot a little, come prove it. No signature, but Maya knew who'd sent it. Colonel Brennan had decided to test the new clerk. She should have ignored it. should have maintained her cover, should have remembered that she was here to observe, not engage. Instead, she texted back, "I'll be there," because sometimes the best way to understand someone was to stand beside them and do the thing they loved. To see them in their element, where the mask came off and the truth showed through. And because a small, stubborn part of her, the part that was Daniel Hartley's daughter, couldn't resist the invitation to shoot. The rifle range at 0600 was cold and empty. Maya arrived carrying her gym bag, which now held her father's M110 in a soft case that looked like it might contain yoga equipment. She debated bringing it, decided the risk was worth the potential gain. Brennan was already there, setting up targets at various distances. He'd claimed lane 3, halfway down the line of firing positions. When he saw her approaching, something that might have been a smile crossed his face. "Didn't think you'd show," he said. "I'm an early riser, sir." He gestured to the range. Targets at 200, 400, 600 yards. Standard progression. "You said you shoot a little. Let's see it." Maya pulled out the M110. Watched Brennan's face as he recognized it. "That's a SASS, he said slowly. "Where'd a GS civilian get a M110? "Estate sale," Maya lied smoothly. "Previous owner was military. It was cheaper than the civilian equivalents." It wasn't a great lie, but it was early morning, and Brennan seemed more interested in the rifle than her story. "You know how to use it?" "Well enough not to hurt anyone." Brennan gestured to the firing line. 200 yards, iron sights. "Show me." Maya settled into position, felt the rifle fit against her shoulder like it always had, like her father's arms, like coming home. Controlled her breathing, let her heart rate drop. Found the target through the rear aperture. The shot surprised her the way good shots always did. One moment the target was whole. The next, a hole appeared dead center. Brennan grunted. "Lucky. Do it again." She fired 4 more shots. 4 more holes in a group you could cover with a quarter. Brennan's tone had changed. 400. Maya adjusted her position, calculated the holdover mentally, fired 5 more. All center mass. 600. She knew she should miss, should shoot like a competent amateur, not like someone who'd made confirmed kills at 4 times this distance. Should maintain her cover. But the morning was cold and clear, and her father's rifle was in her hands, and something about Brennan's trembling fingers and distant eyes made her want to show him that excellence still existed in the world. She fired 5 shots, group size, 3 inches. Brennan set down his coffee, walked to the spotting scope, looked downrange for a long moment. Brennan sat down heavily on the shooting bench. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "Your father saved my life in Desert Storm. We were pinned down by Iraqi artillery. Danny put 3 rounds through the observation post directing fire. 600 yards in a sandstorm. I've never seen shooting like that before or since." He looked up at Maya, and she saw his eyes were wet. "Until just now," he finished. They sat in silence for a moment. 2 warriors on a cold morning, connected by a dead man's legacy and the particular language of precision marksmanship. Finally, Brennan spoke again. "Why are you really here? On this base, working logistics. You shoot like a professional, but you're pretending to be a clerk. Why?" Maya made a decision, not to tell him everything, but to tell him enough. "Because something's wrong on this base. Accidents, malfunctions. And I think whoever's responsible doesn't even know they're doing it." Brennan's face went gray. "You think it's me. I think you're struggling with something, and I think it's affecting your work. And I think my father would want me to help you before more people get hurt." "Your father was a better man than I am," Brennan said quietly. "My father had PTSD too," Maya replied, "from Desert Storm. He got help. He taught me that asking for help wasn't weakness. It was the hardest shot you'd ever take, but also the most important." Brennan's hands were shaking worse now. He looked at them like they belonged to someone else. I can't trust them anymore, he said. My hands. I'm training Marines and I can't do the precision work myself. So I'm teaching them techniques I can no longer execute. And if they're learning wrong because of me, how long? Maya asked gently. 6 months, maybe more. I thought I could push through it, thought it would pass, but it's getting worse. The weapons malfunctions, the vehicles. You've been trying to do inspections with hands that aren't steady anymore. I didn't know, Brennan said, and his voice broke. God help me, I didn't know I was hurting people. I was just trying to do my job. Maya thought about the 13 different ways this could go wrong, about blowing her cover, about NCIS in courts-martial, and the destruction of a decorated warrior's career, about what her father would do. Colonel, she said carefully, what if I told you there was a way to fix this without destroying you? A way to turn what you're going through into something that helps others? I'd say you're dreaming. Maybe, but my father used to say the best warriors are the ones who survive their wars and then teach others how to survive theirs. You know what trauma looks like. You know how it hides. What if make up an excuse? Transfer the responsibility, whatever it takes. Because if one more malfunction happens on your watch, there won't be any way to save this. Brennan nodded slowly. All right, but Monroe, who are you? Really? Someone who believes warriors deserve better than being thrown away when they're wounded, even when the wounds don't show. She left him sitting on the bench, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. Holloway burst out of her office. What's the situation? Ethan Sullivan from communications ran past, radio in hand. Marine Recon Platoon, live fire exercise at Range 7. Multiple weapons malfunctions. At least 3 injuries, possibly more. Medevac inbound. Maya's blood went cold. Range 7. The exercise she'd seen scheduled on Brennan's training calendar. She was moving before she made a conscious decision to move. Out of the office, down the hall, through doors she wasn't supposed to access with her civilian badge. Behind her, someone shouted, "Monroe, where are you?" She didn't stop, didn't explain, just ran. By the time she reached Range 7, 2 ambulances were already there. Marines clustered in tight groups, some with blood on their uniforms. Corpsmen moving between casualties. The particular organized chaos that followed violence. She found Brennan standing apart from everyone, staring at 8 M4 rifles laid out on a tarp. His face was the color of old snow. Maya approached slowly, saw what he was seeing. Every rifle's gas tube was obstructed, not obviously, just enough to cause pressure buildup. Just enough that when fired under sustained combat conditions, the pressure would spike and cause malfunctions ranging from stovepipes to catastrophic failures. Injuries. Not deaths, thank God, but injuries that could have been deaths. I checked these, Brennan said without looking at her. His voice was flat, empty. 2 days ago, I checked them personally. I must have. My hands. I couldn't see the obstructions because my hands were shaking too much to feel them. Around them, Marines were being loaded into ambulances. The range safety officer was cordoning off the area. Investigators were being called. This was the moment, the point where Brennan's career ended and courts-martial began, and the whole thing turned into exactly the kind of disaster Admiral Williams had sent her to prevent. Maya looked at the rifles, at Brennan, at the wounded Marines, made a decision that would either save everything or destroy it completely. She pulled out her phone, not the civilian phone she'd been using, the encrypted one she kept in her bag for emergencies. Dialed a number that went directly to the Pentagon. "This is Hartley," she said when Admiral Williams answered. "I need an immediate extraction for Colonel Victor Brennan, Medical Authority, PTSD Crisis Intervention. And I need NCIS to halt their investigation pending my report." There was a pause on the other end. Then, "Admiral Hartley, are you breaking cover?" "Yes, sir. It's necessary." "Understood. Extraction team will be on site in 90 minutes. What do you need from me?" Authorization to assume command and contain this situation before it becomes a spectacle. Another pause, longer this time. You have authorization. Don't make me regret this. Maya hung up, turned to find Lieutenant Colonel Kane standing behind her, having followed her from headquarters. His face showed confusion, shock, the beginnings of anger. "Monroe, what the hell is—" "Sir," Maya said quietly, "I'm going to need to show you some identification, and then I'm going to need you to trust me for the next 90 minutes. Can you do that?" She pulled out her actual military ID, the one with her real rank. Kane looked at it, looked at her, looked at the ID again. You're a Rear Admiral?" "Yes, sir, and I'm about to save this base from tearing itself apart, but I need your help." Kane's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Behind them, Brennan had sunk to his knees beside the rifles, trembling hands pressed against his face. "Help me get the colonel somewhere quiet," Maya said, "before the investigators arrive, and then I'll explain everything." Kane looked at her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he nodded. "All right, Admiral, but this better be one hell of an explanation." "It will be," Maya promised. She walked over to Brennan, crouched beside him. "Colonel," she said gently, "I need you to come with me now. I'm getting you help, real help, but you have to trust me." Brennan looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much death. "I hurt my Marines," he said. "I know, and we're going to make sure it never happens again. But first, we're going to make sure you survive this. Come on." She helped him to his feet. Kane took his other arm. Together they walked him away from the rifles and the blood and the mistake that could have killed him, toward a future that might, if they were lucky, include redemption instead of destruction. Behind them, sirens wailed and investigators assembled, and the machinery of official response began its inevitable grind. But Maya Hartley, who'd spent 6 weeks being invisible, was about to become very visible indeed. And tomorrow morning, the entire base would learn that their new logistics clerk was actually the Admiral who'd been watching them all along. The question was whether they'd ever trust her again after the deception. The answer would determine whether any of this had been worth it. The extraction team arrived in an unmarked van at 11:47 hours. 2 Navy psychiatrists and a medical corpsman, all with the kind of quiet competence that suggested they'd done this before. They took Colonel Brennan without fanfare, without handcuffs, without the theatrical drama that usually accompanied a senior officer's fall from grace. Just 3 professionals helping a wounded warrior get to safety before the system could devour him. Maya watched the van disappear through the main gate, then turned to face Lieutenant Colonel Kane. They were standing in his office. The door was closed. Outside, the base was buzzing with rumors and speculation, and the particular energy that follows when something breaks the routine. Kane sat behind his desk, looking at Maya's military ID for the 3rd time, like he expected it to say something different. "Rear Admiral Maya Hartley," he read aloud. "Naval Surface Warfare. Previous commands include Destroyer Squadron 15, Task Force 77 during the Taiwan Strait crisis." He looked up. "The Taiwan Strait, you commanded the ships that kept the Chinese from blockading Taiwan in 2023. "Yes, sir." "And before that?" He flipped through the file she'd given him, the real one, not the sanitized clerk version. "Scout Sniper, Marine Corps, 89 confirmed kills, Navy Cross for action in Afghanistan, Silver Star for—" He stopped reading. "Jesus Christ. I know this is a lot to process, sir." "A lot to process?" Kane's voice rose slightly. "You've been sitting in my logistics office for 6 weeks pretending to be a GS-7 clerk, while you're actually a flag officer who commanded a destroyer squadron. That's not a lot to process. That's completely insane." "It was necessary, sir." "For what? To spy on us? To—" He stopped himself, visibly gathering control. "Explain, from the beginning, and it better be good." Maya told him. About the 40% accident rate, about NCIS's failed investigation, about Admiral Williams sending her undercover because they needed someone who could see what everyone else was missing, about Brennan's PTSD and the pattern of malfunctions and the impossible choice between destroying a hero and protecting the Marines under his command. Kane listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "You could have told me," he finally said. "When you figured out what was happening, you could have brought me in." "Could I have, sir? If I'd walked into your office 3 weeks ago and said, 'I'm secretly an admiral investigating your base,' would you have believed me? Or would you have had me escorted off base by security?" Kane's expression suggested she had a point. "And even if you believed me," Maya continued, "what would you have done about Brennan? Court-martial? Medical board? Either way, his career ends in disgrace. And every Marine he ever trained questions whether they learned from someone who was broken. So instead what? Befriended him? Got him to confess? I showed him that someone cared whether he survived this. That's what my father would have done." Kane rubbed his face with both hands. "Your father, Master Chief Daniel Hartley. Brennan mentioned him this morning before we took him away. Said your father saved his life in Desert Storm." "He did. And then my father spent the next 2 years dealing with PTSD from that same deployment. He got help. He survived. He taught me that warriors don't have to choose between honor and healing." "And now what?" Kane asked. "Brennan's gone. The investigation is on hold, but tomorrow morning this base is going to want answers. What do I tell them?" Maya took a breath. "Tomorrow morning, sir, you're going to introduce me as the new commanding officer, and I'm going to tell them the truth." Kane blinked. "You're taking command? Of Coronado?" "That was always the plan, sir. Once the sabotage investigation concluded, Admiral Williams felt the base needed leadership that understood both the strategic picture and ground-level operations. My undercover work was just advanced reconnaissance." "That's," Kane shook his head slowly, "that's actually brilliant. You've already seen every problem we have. You know where the bodies are buried." "Literally and figuratively," Maya agreed. "But sir, I need you to understand something. I didn't do this to humiliate anyone. Not you, not Holloway, not any of the people who made jokes about the new clerk. I did this because this base deserves better than it's been getting, and the only way to fix it was to see it exactly as it is." Kane studied her for a long moment. Then he stood, came to attention, and saluted. "Permission to be candid, Admiral?" "Granted. I'm pissed that you deceived me. I'm embarrassed that I didn't figure it out. And I'm terrified about what the morale impact is going to be when everyone realizes they've been complaining about you to your face for 6 weeks. He paused. "But I'm also impressed as hell. And if half of what's in this file is true, you're exactly the kind of commander this base needs." "Thank you, sir. That means more than you know. One question, though. Tomorrow, when you take command, what happens to the people who disrespected you? Briggs with his comments about typing speed. Bradford complaining about protocols you wrote. Hell, I barely looked at you when you reported in." Maya smiled slightly. "What happens to them, sir, is that they get a chance to be better. That's the whole point." The change of command ceremony was scheduled for 0800 the following morning. Maya spent the evening in temporary quarters, preparing. Not the speech, she'd known what she was going to say for weeks, but herself. The mental transition from invisible observer to visible commander. At 0600, she put on her dress white uniform for the first time in 6 weeks. The fabric felt strange after so long in civilian clothes. Heavier, more formal. The weight of authority made visible. She stood in front of the mirror and fastened each button with deliberate care, attached her ribbons in precise rows. Navy Cross, Silver Star, Purple Heart, Presidential Unit Citation, and a dozen others that told the story of 20 years in uniform. Finally, the shoulder boards with their 2 silver stars. Rear Admiral, 07. One of fewer than 200 people in the entire Navy who wore this rank. The woman looking back at her in the mirror was someone the base had never seen. But she was also someone Maya had been carrying inside for 6 weeks, waiting for the moment to emerge. The parade ground at 0755 was packed. Every available person on base stood in formation. 2,000 sailors, Marines, and civilian personnel, all wondering what the hell was going on. Rumors had been flying since yesterday's incident at the rifle range. Everything from a terrorist attack to a failed inspection to Colonel Brennan having a mental breakdown. Nobody had guessed the truth. Maya stood in the building adjacent to the parade ground, watching through a window as the base leadership assembled on the platform. Kane at the podium, looking nervous. The band in position, the colors waiting to be presented. Her hands were steady. Her heart rate was 68 beats per minute, the same as it had been before that 2,400-yard shot in Afghanistan 15 years ago. Some things never changed. Watched faces go from confusion to shock to disbelief in the span of a heartbeat. There in the third row, Sergeant Briggs went pale as snow. Captain Bradford's mouth literally fell open. Near the motor pool formation, Master Chief Blackwell straightened unconsciously, and something that might have been a smile touched his face. In the logistics section, Major Holloway's hand went to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. For a moment, she just stood there, looking out at the faces she'd come to know over 6 weeks. Faces that had ignored her, complained around her, made jokes at her expense. Faces that were now processing the magnitude of their mistake. She raised her hand in salute to the entire formation. 2,000 hands snapped up in return. The sound of boots striking pavement in unison echoed like thunder across the base. Then Maya lowered her hand and stepped to the microphone. I wanted to see this base the way you see it every single day, when no admirals are watching, when no inspections are scheduled, when it's just you and the mission and the systems that are supposed to support you, but too often don't. In the formation, she could see people shift uncomfortably. Good. Discomfort meant they were listening. I saw frustration. I saw equipment that should have been replaced years ago. I saw requisitions delayed so long that late became normal. I saw Chief Sullivan keeping communications alive with equipment that should have been retired a decade ago. She looked directly at the logistics section. I saw Petty Officer Rodriguez working through the night to fix a data backlog that wasn't his fault. I saw Sergeant Briggs showing up every day to do a job he resents because he still believes in the mission even when the mission has broken his body. Briggs's face showed something between shame and surprise. You weren't broken. The silence was absolute now. But I wasn't hiding incompetence. I was hiding the rank that would have made you hide the truth from me. Because when admirals show up, people tell them what they think they want to hear. When clerks show up, people tell them what's actually happening. She took a breath. Yesterday, there was an incident at the rifle range. Marines were injured because of weapons malfunctions. I know many of you are wondering what happened, wondering who's responsible. Colonel Victor Brennan is not a criminal. He's not a saboteur. He's a casualty of invisible wounds that we as an institution have failed to address properly. And instead of destroying him for having the audacity to be wounded, we're going to help him heal. And then we're going to put him in charge of building a program to help others heal before they reach the breaking point he reached. She could see shock rippling through the formation. This wasn't how these stories usually ended. My father, Master Chief Daniel Hartley, taught me 2 things. First, precision comes from 10,000 hours of practice. There are no shortcuts to excellence. Second, the hardest shot you'll ever take is admitting you need help, but it's also the most important shot, because warriors who survive their wars have an obligation to teach others how to survive theirs. Maya straightened. Starting today, this base will be different. Not because I'm going to yell at you, or threaten you, or punish you for the failures of broken systems, but because we're going to fix those systems together. Because we're going to expect excellence from each other, and provide the support that makes excellence possible. She gestured toward the formations. Major Rebecca Holloway, front and center. Holloway marched up, face showing a mixture of emotions Maya couldn't quite parse. She saluted sharply. Maya returned it, then pulled out a set of orders. This officer held logistics together with willpower and coffee when everything else was falling apart. She never stopped fighting for her people, even when it cost her health and peace of mind. Effective immediately, Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Holloway will lead our logistics reform initiative with full authority to rebuild every broken process we've been tolerating. She pinned the new rank on Holloway's collar. The newly promoted officer's eyes were wet, but her voice was steady when she said, "Thank you, ma'am. I won't let you down." "You never did," Maya replied quietly. Master Chief Marcus Blackwell, front and center. Blackwell approached with the confident stride of a senior NCO who'd seen everything twice. But his salute was crisp, respectful. When I asked this Marine why he wouldn't sign paperwork that wasn't accurate, he told me that corners cut on maintenance mean people die in the field. He was right. He'll be overseeing our new Fleet Maintenance Excellence Program, setting the standard for every other base in the Pacific. Blackwell's voice was gravel and pride. "Aye, aye, ma'am. Semper Fi." "Semper Fi, Master Chief." Chief Petty Officer Ethan Sullivan, front and center. Sullivan walked up, looking slightly bewildered, his red hair bright in the morning sun. This sailor kept our communications running with equipment held together by skill and stubbornness. He told me weeks ago that our systems were failing. Command heard him. Now everyone will hear him. Chief Sullivan is our new Director of Technical Operations and Infrastructure. Sullivan's grin was wide enough to split his face. "I'll make you proud, ma'am." "You already have." Maya turned back to the formation. These three didn't wait for permission to do the right thing. They acted. They spoke up. They cared. That's what I expect from everyone on this base from this day forward. She let the silence stretch for a moment. "Some of you are probably wondering if I'm angry, if I'm going to punish people for the things they said when they thought I was just a clerk." She paused. "I'm not, because you weren't disrespecting me personally. You were expressing frustration with a system that was failing you. And that's not a crime. That's honest communication. I want more of it, not less." She could see visible relief on multiple faces. "But understand this, from this day forward, we fix problems before they become excuses. We speak truth to power because I am power and I want truth. We take care of each other because that's what warriors do. And we never, ever let bureaucracy or politics or fear prevent us from doing what's right." Maya raised her hand in salute one more time. "I am honored to command you. Now let's get to work." The formation erupted, not in the stiff, formal applause of military ceremony, but in genuine, spontaneous response. It started with Blackwell and spread outward, 2,000 people expressing relief and hope, and the particular gratitude that comes when someone finally sees the truth you've been living. Maya stood at attention, receiving their response, and felt something loosen in her chest that had been tight for 6 weeks. This was why she'd done it. Not for the reveal, not for the drama, but for this moment, when a base full of good people realized they finally had a commander who understood. The ceremony concluded. Formations dispersed. Maya spent the next 4 hours in back-to-back meetings with department heads, laying out the immediate priorities. Fix the supply chain bottlenecks. Replace aging communications equipment. Implement the maintenance protocols Blackwell had been advocating for months. By 1400, she needed air. She found Kane in his office, now officially serving as her executive officer. "Permission to take a few hours, XO?" "Granted." "Where are you going?" "The rifle range. I need to think, and I think better when I'm shooting." Kane almost smiled. "Permission to join you? I'd like to see if the stories are true." "Which stories?" "All of them." They drove to the range in Kane's truck, not speaking much. When they arrived, Maya pulled her father's M110 from its case, while Kane set up targets at progressively longer distances. "How far?" he asked. Maya looked downrange. Calculated wind, temperature, the particular quality of afternoon light. 2,000 yards. Kane stopped moving. 2,000, that's over a mile. 1.136 miles to be precise. "Admiral, I've been in the Navy for 26 years. I've seen a lot of shooting. I've never seen anyone make a shot at that distance with standard issue equipment." "Then you're about to see something new." She settled into position, felt the rifle nestle against her shoulder, began the calculations that were less mathematics now than muscle memory. Range, 2,000 yards, 7,200 feet. Bullet, 190 grain Sierra Match King, 7.62 NATO. Time of flight, 3.4 seconds. Bullet drop, 640 inches, 53.3 feet. Higher than this entire building. Wind, 12 miles per hour, variable, 9 to 10 o'clock. Drift, 22 inches right. Coriolis effect, shooting north, northern hemisphere. 2.2 minutes of angle right. Spin drift, right-hand rifling. 1.8 minutes of angle right. Temperature, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Correction, negative 0.3 minutes of angle. Total elevation, 34.7 minutes of angle, 146 clicks. Total windage, 11.8 minutes of angle left to compensate for cumulative right drift. Her breathing slowed. Heart rate dropped to 68. The world narrowed to the target. The wind, the perfect stillness between heartbeats. She fired. The shot cracked across the range. 3.4 seconds of silence. Then, impossibly far away, the distinctive ring of steel being struck. Kane had been watching through a spotting scope. He lowered it slowly. "Center mass," he said, his voice carrying a note of reverence. "At 1,136 yards, with a 33-year-old rifle." Maya safed the weapon, sat up. "My father gave me this rifle when I was 15. Made me calculate every shot by hand. No computers, no laser rangefinders, just math and wind and patience." She looked at Kane. "Excellence doesn't need to announce itself, XO. It just needs to exist. And eventually, people notice." Kane was quiet for a moment. Then, "The entire base is going to hear about this shot within an hour." "Probably. They're going to want to see you do it again." "Also probably." "Are you going to?" Maya thought about it. About the fine line between demonstrating competence and showing off. About what her father would do. "Tell them I'll run a shooting clinic," she said. "Anyone who wants to learn long-range, precision marksmanship can sign up. I'll teach the same way my father taught me. The fundamentals, the patience, the 10,000 hours of practice that turn impossible shots into routine ones." Kane smiled. "That's brilliant. You'll turn yourself from the admiral who tricked them into the admiral who teaches them." "That was always the plan," Maya said quietly. 4 weeks later, the base rifle range was crowded with people. Marines, sailors, even some civilian contractors. All of them here for Admiral Hartley's weekly precision shooting clinic. Maya stood at the firing line with 12 students, 6 men, 6 women, ranging from junior enlisted to senior NCOs. She'd insisted on a mixed group. Excellence didn't care about rank or gender, only about the willingness to do the work. One of the students, Lance Corporal Emma Caldwell, was struggling with her breathing control. 19 years old, blonde, trying hard but frustrated. "Ma'am," she said hesitantly, "some of the guys in my unit say I'm too small to handle the recoil on the longer shots." Maya set down her rifle and walked over. "Lance Corporal, I'm 5'3" and 118 pounds. I've made confirmed kills at 2,400 yards in combat. Size doesn't pull triggers, skill does." She demonstrated the proper shooting position, showing how body mechanics and technique mattered more than raw strength. "Watch my form. The rifle's recoil goes straight back into my shoulder, not up. That's not because I'm strong, it's because my position is correct. Strength fades, technique doesn't. She fired a shot, minimal recoil, perfect follow-through. Caldwell tried it. This time, the rifle stayed steady. There you go, Maya said. Now do that 10,000 more times, and you'll stop thinking about it. 10,000? Caldwell's eyes went wide. That's how long it took me. My father started teaching me when I was 15. He died when I was 18. Every shot I take now honors his memory. Every student I teach carries forward what he taught me. She looked at the entire group. That's what this is really about. Not just marksmanship, legacy. The knowledge that warriors pass down to those who come after. My father taught me. I'm teaching you. Someday you'll teach others. That's how excellence survives. Across the range, a figure approached. Colonel Brennan, looking healthier than Maya had seen him in months. He'd spent 4 weeks in intensive treatment at a military psychiatric facility in Maryland, working with specialists who understood combat trauma. Now he was back, not as a sniper instructor, but as the newly appointed director of the Warrior Transition Program. "Admiral," he said, saluting. "Permission to observe?" "Granted. How are you, Colonel?" "Better. Still working through it, but better." He looked at the students. "I wanted to thank you for what you did, for seeing that I could be saved instead of just punished." "You saved yourself, sir. I just made sure you had the chance." Brennan shook his head. "You gave me more than a chance. You gave me a purpose. The Warrior Transition Program already has 47 Marines and sailors enrolled. People who wouldn't have come forward if they hadn't seen that it's possible to get help and keep your career. That's your victory, Colonel. You're turning your pain into someone else's hope. That's what warriors do." They stood together for a moment, watching the students shoot, watching excellence being built, one careful shot at a time. "Your father would be proud," Brennan said quietly. "I hope so," Maya replied. "I'm trying to be worthy of what he taught me." That evening, Maya drove to Arlington National Cemetery, 3,000 miles away in her mind, but present in her memory. She couldn't physically visit her father's grave. Arlington was across the country, but she'd set up a small memorial in her quarters. A photograph, his dog tags, the logbook where he'd recorded every lesson he'd taught her. She opened the logbook to a random page, found an entry from 1988 when she was 15. "Taught Maya holdover calculations today. She's frustrated because the math is hard, but she's getting it, slowly, patiently, the same way I learned. I told her, excellence is built in silence. You don't announce it, you don't demand recognition, you just do the work, every day, until the impossible becomes routine." She asked me why I keep teaching her if I won't be around forever. I told her, because the truest victory isn't the shot you make. It's when the people you taught make shots you never could. She didn't understand yet. Someday she will. Maya closed the logbook carefully. "I understand now, Dad," she said to the photograph. "It was never about being the best sniper. It was about making sure the knowledge didn't die with you. About passing forward what you learned so it could help people you'd never meet." She looked out the window at the base she now commanded. At the lights coming on as evening fell. At the people moving through their duties, doing work that mattered because someone finally cared enough to fix the systems that had been breaking them. 6 months from now, Naval Support Base Coronado would win the Installation Excellence Award. The Warrior Transition Program would expand to cover the entire Pacific Fleet. The logistics reforms Holloway implemented would become the model for every Navy base. But Maya wouldn't know that yet. Right now, she just knew that she'd done what her father taught her. See the truth, act on it, and help people be better than they thought they could be. Not through speeches or authority or the weight of rank, but through quiet excellence that just existed until others noticed and wanted to be part of it. The next morning, she was back on the range at 600, back teaching fundamentals to students who would someday teach others, back building the legacy her father had started when he first placed a rifle in her 15-year-old hands and said, Baby girl, let me show you how precision is built. The cycle continued. Excellence passed forward. Warriors teaching warriors. The truest victory. And somewhere, Maya believed, Master Chief Daniel Hartley was watching his daughter carry forward everything he'd taught her, multiplied across dozens of lives he'd never touched directly, but would influence forever. That was the shot that mattered most. Not the impossible distance, not the perfect precision, but the legacy that outlived them both.